Aloha, welcome to Kids Cooking Local. I'm Chef Ronnie from Tiki's Grill and Bar, and we are making basil zucchini Parmesan pasta. Okay, zucchini. I washed these ingredients already. Recipe says simply chopped. That's vague. I'm gonna cut them. They're mashed up in this recipe, so I'm gonna cut them a little bit large so I can caramelize them and then mash them up. Like I was saying in my earlier segment, I don't cut the ends off. I use that as a handle. No sense in cutting that off and then have to be closer to your fingers with your knife. We're gonna mash these up. So I'm not gonna cut them too small. Again, see I'm leaving the end. This recipe calls for zucchini or summer squash. We're using zucchini. You obviously want to use whatever you can get that's freshest. Zucchinis have a lot of water in them. In this recipe, that's how they're used. They're used to be essentially part of the sauce. It's important that when we cook these, we're going to caramelize them because of all that water that's in them. Zucchini and summer squash don't taste very great when they're just boiled or steamed, unless you have a tremendous amount of butter. But in this case, we're going to caramelize them. That's going to steam the inside of them, make them nice and soft. We're going to mash them up as part of the sauce. Oops. Okay, garlic. There's more than one way to cut a garlic. So at home, I actually have a garlic press. It's the first time I've ever owned one in my life. I've had it for about a year. Garlic permeates your skin. It's strong. I love the smell of garlic, but it's hard to get out once it's in there. That was why I got the garlic press. This is how my mother showed me to cut garlic, even when I was young. Just be careful, use the flat of the knife. Keep your hand away from the sharp part of the blade. Just give it a good pop. It comes right out. If you had a garlic press, which a lot of people do, then you could just stick that in the garlic press at that point. If there's a little bit of skin left on there, it'll stay in the press. Smash the garlic with the flat of the knife. If you have a plastic cutting board, you can use a plastic cutting board because the flavor of garlic and the oil, you're gonna have a hard time getting it out of wood. Keep your fingers back and just mince the garlic. Cut the very end off if it's big. Should have did that first. You don't have to mince the garlic into baby food or applesauce. It doesn't have to be tiny. That's one reason people actually don't prefer a garlic press for everything. It does make it pretty small. In Italian cooking, it's not usually cut really small. When you cook the garlic, garlic has multiple flavors. When it's raw, it's very spicy and hot in your mouth. Pungent, extremely strong. When you saute it lightly, most of that heat goes away and it gets a nutty flavor. If you overcook it and cook it too dark, anything past golden brown, it gets very bitter. There's a use for that in a lot of different recipes. Okay, that's garlic. Okay, fresh thyme. Fresh thyme is wonderful. I love the flavor of it. It's hard to grow for some reason in Hawaii. I can never successfully grow this in my yard. I don't know what I'm doing wrong. I can grow basil very easily and other things. I have a hard time with fresh thyme. It's a great savory herb for Italian cooking or any other type of European cooking. You don't want a bunch of big stems in there. If you have the opportunity to choose your thyme, choose the largest ones you can find. The leaves can be really tiny on these. And again, the stems they're almost inedible. Maybe the very tip is tender. You don't want any of this. This is very thick and woody. This recipe calls for a tablespoon of chopped thyme. And even if you look at this, it looks like a good amount of thyme. After it's chopped, I bet all this will barely be a tablespoon. if you're making any kind of stock. That's what we do in the restaurant. We don't waste this because although the stem is inedible, it offers a lot of flavor. If you're cooking some stock for a soup, so I'm just gently rolling my knife over it. Doesn't need to be made into lawn clippings and minced into oblivion. Time. And then this recipe calls for a cup of basil, roughly chopped it says. I washed this. It's a lot easier to cut fresh basil when it's dry. I grab it like this right under the flower and pull them all off at once. The end of the stem is a bit tender. The rest of the stem is not very tender. Again, if I was making stock or something, then I would save all these and throw it inside. There's tons of flavor. It's just not very palatable. Okay, we're going to call that about a cup. So if I'm going to chiffonade basil, because this says rough cut, but even when I rough cut basil, I don't just rough cut it across the board like that. I still would give it a nice cross cut. So I roll it up under my fingers into a little ball. The large leaves are easy to hold the smaller leaves together. And then that's considered like a chiffonade, or that's a rough chiffonade. You know, it'd be thinner and fancy if you're going to make it like hair. And then I just kind of go like this and then cross cut the chiffonade. To me, that's what rough cut basil is. We're not trying to make it too small. You want to taste it in your teeth. We're not making it into pesto. Okay, so this recipe says over medium heat, add the olive oil. When it shimmers, keep in mind, we're cooking on a commercial stove. It's got a lot of BTUs. It has a lot of power. So we're going to add the olive oil. We don't necessarily want to be smoking this olive oil. This recipe calls for virgin olive oil. But it needs to shimmer. You always add the oil when the pan is hot. It'll stick a lot less. Zucchini. This recipe says to add the garlic and zucchini at the same time with the chili flakes. I guess because they figure a lot of water is going to come out of the zucchini. I'm actually going to hold off on that a little bit, specifically because I have such a powerful stove. In the meantime, I'm going to salt my pasta water. Heavily salted for pasta always. Garlic, chili pepper flakes, right? Butter, pepper, and thyme. Salt and pepper on the zucchini. It's going to help draw some of the water out. At home, if you had a nice oiled wok, would be great for this. I cook most of my pasta dishes at home in a wok, just because it all fits in there at once. So you can see that it's starting to get some color on the zucchini. Even with all this firepower, the pan is still cooled down. We've given it the opportunity for a lot of the water to already come out. So I'm going to add garlic. Okay, so because we chose angel hair, and angel hair cooks in a few minutes, I kind of skipped that step because it takes about 8 minutes to cook the zucchini. The zucchini's at the point now where it'll require the pasta water as part of the sauce. So we're going to add the zucchini. We're going to add the angel hair to the salted boiling water. You can't walk away from angel hair. Like it says in the package, 3 to 4 minutes. Once it gets to that point, it's not going to stop cooking unless you run it under cold water. And that's not something you're probably trying to do. We want the starch. In Italian pasta dishes, you want the starch to be part of the sauce. The starch from this pasta is very quickly going to go into the pasta water. You can see that these have shrunk up. And there's lots of caramelizing in there on the zucchinis and the garlic. That clearly shows that a lot of the water is gone. It came out very quickly because of how powerful the burner is. This recipe specifically says 3 cups of the pasta water. It's the 8-ounce ladle. I'm going to add this in right now, but you have to keep in mind that I salted that water pretty heavily. So now some of that salt is in this sauce. That can all be adjusted at the end. It's the most important part of cooking, is making sure the salt and pepper is adjusted at the end. Anyone can follow a recipe, but there's variables. Okay, now I'm going to add the fresh thyme, the butter. Okay. I'd say that was about 3 minutes on this. It's definitely soft. I normally would do this over the sink at home. So pasta just keeps on drinking up whatever liquids you keep putting in there. Has a harder time drinking up the fat, the oil, and the butter. Or if you were cooking something with heavy cream, for instance. So you can see that's 3 cups of liquid in there. In a couple of minutes, all that liquid is essentially going to be gone. So now we're going to toss in a cup of Parmesan cheese. Okay. We're going to toss in the basil. Stir the basil in quickly if you want it to stay green. If it simply gets steamed on top of the pasta, it will turn brown very quickly. And it'll stay brown. So now you can see there's not very much liquid in there at all. Okay, so at this point, you definitely want to taste this and make sure the salt is right. All that Parmesan cheese has all that salt flavor in it. I'd say the salt is spot on. This is how I would serve this family style at my house, right on the table. Some crunchy baguette and a salad. You feed the whole family with that. The zucchinis are really soft, and I should have mashed them up a bit more. And there you go. Thank you for watching Kids Cooking Local. I'm Chef Ronnie from Tiki's Grill and Bar. This is our basil zucchini parmesan pasta. We'll see you next time.